Ayoub from the Localization Fireside Chat podcast. Your favorite podcaster is on here, recording episode 164, I believe, or 65 if the count is right. And I'm sure if the count is not right, somebody will correct me a little later, which is fine. You can always correct the host. It's not a big deal. We take criticism on correction. That's okay. Today, I have the honor and distinct pleasure to have with me Andy Sitison, and Andy joined me to talk about a few important AI-related topics. One major theme for our conversation will be today about humanizing AIs, empathetic AI, and the story and the line between the understanding of a human and versus instrumentalizing them, and try to figure out a way to keep the human and value, etc., an AI where it's needed, it's valued, it's useful, but never lose sight of who the human are. So today during the episode here with Andy, during the conversation with Andy, what we'll do is we'll try to explore a few topics. One is around, we have more data than ever before on human right now. And do we finally understand people better because we have the data, or are we just better at simulating empathy? So let's get started with the easy part, Andy. Thank you and welcome to the channel.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it, Robin.
Thanks for being here, and thanks again for taking the time. I know it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and you were doing this recording, so I really appreciate you staying after hour. And so we start the conversation on this channel with the question of the story. I believe everybody's got a story. And just before the recording, I got the sense that you have an excellent story. I can't wait to hear it. Let's get with this question. What is your story? What got you here, Andy?
All right. Well, I was telling you I'm left-handed and North Carolinian by birth. So, I can talk for 20, 30 minutes on nothing. So let's keep it tight and tell you my story in a short version. And I would tell you that I was a musician. So if you're seeing this on video, you probably see a couple of guitars back there. I was a musician and a restaurant owner, and I decided I wanted to make some money instead. And my wife was programming at IBM, and I thought, hey, you know what? I could do that too, probably. So I went and got a master's in it. And after about 3 years of getting all my calculus and math in and everything, I did that for over 30 years. I was an emerging tech guy. It turned out I'm very creative, and I've never done it in tech before, but that kind of played in my hand. And I kind of traveled the globe, covered Latin America, Europe, Asia, and spent a lot of time all over the states. And it was a brilliant career. I did over 30 years, and barely. There's a joke that I didn't do recycles for about 8 years because I was never home on Wednesday, and it's kind of a true story. So in 2016, it was a kind of a big merger between some tech companies, and it gave me the chance to kind of pull the ripcord and take a sabbatical. And I had a great resume, but I didn't want to be that guy, and I didn't want to move to Silicon Valley. And all my presidents and C's and V's were like, "You got to move to Silicon Valley." And I had 3 kids in high school, and it just didn't make sense. I wanted to get creative again. I wanted to start solving problems. I wanted to find ways to help human at the intersection of human and digital, because I felt like I was watching the waves start to wash over people instead of letting people ride on their surfboards on the tech waves that were coming at us. And I could tell it was getting bigger and more daunting, and the gap was getting bigger. So I kind of converted myself, and I said, I want to write code again, and I want to get back to design and kind of get more local and get into some startup activity. And so I started doing AI, machine learning, algorithmic programming, because it was really hot, and I've gotten my degree in math, data management. And so I just helped start a couple startups here in town, and we're just kind of kicking along and seeing where it goes. And to add quickly, I also do a lot around the Chesapeake Bay, and I flew so much. I didn't feel like I had done enough in my local community. So I started working on the fishery and the waters and the shorelines, and do various projects through nonprofits, kind of improve our waterways and our overall experience on the Chesapeake Bay. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. It's almost not boring at that short level. So hopefully that was okay.
That was perfect, man. Thank you so much, Andy. I really appreciate it. I don't know what it is, but I always hear that when somebody's good at science, they are good in art as well. And the fact that you are a musician, you turned to science, you studied calculus, you went back and got your master's degree, that proves the point. Artists and scientists are almost alike in many ways. And, some people put them at a, opposite end of the spectrum. But
Yeah.
they are generally like, if you see somebody playing piano, I always ask the question, "Are you good in math?" And the answer is always yes.
Yes.
It has to be. And here's an evidence.
Well, what's wild about me is that I was so left-handed, and I had really, I mean, the only computer I
Well,
touched
I'm
was
not
an
the only
8-handed.
left-handed man. That's good. At least I have a buddy now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. We can tell by our looks, left-handed, you can always tell. But anyway, I'm just joking with all
We're
the
handsome.
right-handed.
That's it.
But all seriousness, I was left-handed, right-brained, and I touched an ATM machine, and I'd never done any computers, and I was okay at math. I was not really great at school. And so I didn't know any of that stuff, but it did kick in. And now as I've raised kids and grandkids and my wife, we're all neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD combos, and the whole family's wild, and we're all good at music and science and math. So it's definitely a trend there, and it's worthy more study because I love the way the brain works. I don't think we know it well enough.
Yeah, that's right. So now you lived at the intersection of engineering, psychology, arts for decades. You're not chasing the shiny AI demos. You're focused on human augmentation. You describe yourself as strategic creative. What problem do you think, Andy, has obsessed you long enough to earn that label?
Yeah, that's a great. I like to matter. I like to focus on things that are more large, more societal. And when I attack things, although we all do micro and macro things in our lives. So when I say strategic creative, I tend to do things that I kind of consider the impact as much as the craft when I start to do the work. And so that doesn't mean I don't paint a little bit and write some songs and stuff like that. But for me, it's been a real interesting ride. I was helping the Fortune 100, and in many cases, the Fortune 50, go to the cloud with their billion-dollar business apps. And so this is 2012, 2013, and they were telling us, well, we can't afford to do that. We can't afford to do that. And then we started flipping them with their big German business apps. You can figure out which one that might be. And they started going, oh, we can't afford not to do this, because we started to move enough of the footprint there that they realized that they couldn't compete locally in their own data centers. And so you saw this, it was really successful for my company, and we did a lot of shifting for our partners and everything. But I started to get to realize that the centralization is a real challenge for regions and towns, and we're just going to see more and more. And as more centralizes, the regionality of our lovely countries and cities and everything start to be challenged. And so that's part of the sentiment of it, but it's also about the average human and how we connect into all this stuff. So I do a day job of writing AI code, and I'm not a pundit. I call myself a practical expert. I like to know the coding and the algorithmic work. I don't really care whose new model came out last week. Well, I'll let other people mess with that. I used to do that stuff. But yeah, I try to stay strategic and impactful with the work I do.
So when did you realize, Andy, that there was something fundamentally missing from AI in a traditional sense when it comes to human?
It's interesting because I think, well, first off, AI, it's two letters, and it represents everything right now, right? Like we turn two letters
I
into
want to get your
represent.
opinion on this one, because a lot of people
Yeah,
came on this channel and they have different opinions on the word artificial intelligence. Is this like a
yeah.
marketing buzzword, or is it really an intelligence?
Yeah, well, I spent like 6 years, 7 years trying to explain to people what AI was, and now I spend even more time explaining what it's not, and then explaining what I do. It's like I wish you didn't know what it was, and as in any major transformation, any time something becomes buzzy, it takes on all sorts of meanings, and then some of those are so quickly formed and iconified that you have to get past it. And so, here's a great one, like AI and art. Everybody calls it AI slop. Oh, generating pictures. Reality is AI. Well, first let me say, art has been interrupted by technology many times. The metronome was the first thing to steal a musical job, right? It became the drummer, and then we had drum machines, and then we had people that sampled music and hip hop, and you just go down the list. There's people using in CGI in movies and Avatar. All this stuff changes the way art works, but I think AI and art will have a place, and so it won't all be AI slop. And unfortunately, right now it's a very kind of immature and very 2D dimensional look at what AI is in that space. And so that's true of everything, right? So AI is a technology. Everybody, I would say 60% out of the time somebody mentions AI, they're really talking about capitalism. They're not talking about the technology. And I don't trust AI. I hate AI. I did, all that. It's really, it's not the tech. It's how it's been applied to a market opportunity. And often that's immature, not quite ready, and maybe they went a little early, and maybe they shouldn't have done it there in the first place, right? There's a lot of that going on as people try to get market share. And so AI is just in that moment when it's really hard to have a strong conversation about what the technology can do and will do with society when we're all buzzy about it, right? So, that's where I am in the moment.
You bring up a very valid point. The whole capitalism thing. I was just our friends on the environmental side of things. They hate AI. At least I was I was told that. I don't know how true it is. I was doing a presentation or a panel discussion in Montreal. Was it a year ago now? A year and a half ago? And somebody stood up. Happened to be a professor at the University of McGill, I think it was, and said, AI is bad for the environment. That was the first time I heard that statement. So actually, I wanted to go through the rationale of what it is and why are they feeling that way. And then we got into energy consumptions, etc. And then yesterday, somebody was telling me like there was somebody who sent a message out to all the users. I think it was ChatGPT or one of those platforms. I can't remember which one. Stop saying to AI, thank you, because every time you say thank you, you're running a token on the other side and you're burning a lot of energy for it. So don't be polite. Don't be polite to AI. Most AI systems, I don't know if you ran into it, right?
Well, yeah, you're really on a hot topic for me because I mentioned the Chesapeake, and like I run this ghost pot program, and I'll make it quick. But crab pots lose the floats, right? And so they fall to the bottom of the river, and they sit there for a year or 2 years and just kill things, right? And so we've working on techniques to get rid of those. I presented a resiliency conference, and they're like, "Oh, AI, we have a workshop the next day. Can you present at that too?" And I stood up between 500 people and started talking about AI, and man, I didn't realize I totally stepped into it because they were all there. Their perspective was not trustworthy, haven't used it, don't want to use it, and you're stealing all the energy from our world. And they're right in a little bit, but they were also people that were under resourced, trying to do important things, could use productivity tools, and as I taught them a little bit about what AI did, I realized they were significantly behind what most people knew about it. Like if I go to a bunch of teachers, they get it immediately, right? Like I can start with a little bit and take them somewhere. This group needed another hour just to catch them up on foundational pieces because they had no experience to it. And so I explained to them, hey, this is actually a tool that you should use in certain ways. And the other problem is a data center, I'm right here off Hampton Roads, and the water comes up from Europe, right? I mean, the wires come up from Europe, and they're trying to put data centers in here that are the size of counties, and people are showing up with $10 billion and just giving them to people. And you're like, what? There's too much of that going on right now. And part of the problem is in Virginia, at least, in a lot of states, when you show up with a data center that's the size of 6 football fields, you're treated like a guy that owns a 1,200 square foot house. And so, your access to water, your access to power, can't Dominion, our local energy, cannot stop a data center from coming into a space based on the energy consumption they'll do, based on the business rules and the civic rules. So we're dealing with a lot of intermixed things right now as we start to deal with this problem. Energy is used a lot. And then I'll finally end that with, if I look at my phone, I've got probably 300 clicks of AI here. I don't need that many. I need 2, I need 5. And as we try to win market share, this is a very expensive process and creating a bit of a bubble, as we all know. There's a concern of where these guys are going to end up with all the spin they're doing and not getting reimbursed for. So it's an ugly time in a lot of ways because this growth is almost too aggressive, and it would be nice to find some sanity in it. But yeah, I think that's what's happening, and I'm finding myself right in the middle of that conversation.
Now let's shift the conversation a little bit from AI capability to AI purpose. My understanding is you work heavily on NLP and story analysis. Why story instead of behavior, in your opinion, and metrics or sentiments alone for that?
Yeah, it's a great question because I got, I have a psychology undergrad that I didn't know was going to come into play, and it has in brilliant ways. I was doing TEDx in town. I was taking my sabbatical, and I said, hey, I called up the guys and I was looking for things to do. I said, what's the worst job you have that no one's taken yet? I'll take that one. And they said, oh, it's volunteers. I became one of the organizing volunteers, and I managed the crazy number of people that came and helped for TEDx. And one of my co-organizers was starting a company around storytelling. He was an old brand guy out of a CPG and had been doing a lot of brand work, and he just always loved storytelling. And so we started looking at that, and what we found is, the thing about stories that are amazing, it takes us to a more primitive spot in our brainstem. When you sit in a room with 20 people, they'll all chat at each other. But if you one of them starts to stand up and say, "Hey, I want to tell you a story about my granddad, or the first time I went fishing," or whatever, and that person starts telling that story, there's an immediate empathetic response from everybody in the room who also hushed up to listen to that person speaking. And the person speaking gets an empathetic response and an empowerment from that effort. And it's all human. It's us, it's instinctual in us. Stories have a magic potion to them, but also, unlike all the other data, I like to call the monkey clicks, the surveys and all the reviews and everything else, a story forces you to kind of go within yourself. And we ask for stories to kind of pull out the heartfelt perspectives of the person, because what we want to know is what they need. So if you're a scientist, if you're in exercise, let's say you're an energy drink or something, you can survey somebody and say, well, do you like grape or strawberry? And you'll get an answer. But what you don't get necessarily is what that person needs from you. And so I think there's a deeper understanding in exercise. Why do you exercise? Do you exercise because you want to beat your brother at it? Do you want to, get a more mental health? Do you want to lose a little weight? What's driving you? And then as that energy drink, if you can connect to the drivers, you got a much better position in getting sticky with that person. And so that's why we use stories, to get closer to people, to really pull out from them what they feel and need. And frankly, give them a voice. And a lot of people feel like they don't have a voice today. So, we all, we wake up and get 2 petabytes collected on us, but nobody really cares. They want to know what I'm doing so they can send me an ad. And part of that, I'm going to the next topic, but since we've been the free product, we're getting free, and we're the product. Tech is driven on a model right now that essentially doesn't care how we feel or what we think or what we need, as long as we click on the ad. That's the goal, right? It's ad revenue, and I think we've run that race. I think that's a pretty interesting topic all in itself.
You just reminded me back in the days, I mean, not too long ago, before AI hit the peak, I guess, or I don't know if we hit the peak already, but whatever. Before it became mainstream, there was data being collected on people like using regular methods. Let's say a mortgage broker, for instance, if they notice somebody put on Facebook that the family is looking for a new house, or they're about to move, or somebody got a new job, the mortgage broker will cold that family and offer their services. So it seems to me like the old methods are being recycled.
A little bit of a connection issue. I'm going to check and see if sorry to have this issue with you, but let's see.
Oh, yeah. I hear you well on my side there, Andy.
Okay, well, great. I hopefully won't lose you, but I'm on some reason I jumped to the.
You can switch if you want to, Andy. No worries. Don't worry, Andy. You can switch Wi-Fi's if you want.
How about now? Is everything working now?
Yeah, it's working. I hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear you. No problem. And for the audience, I mean, this type of stuff happens on every podcast pretty much. Now, we're doing these podcasts not in studio, remotely. I mean, Andy's in Virginia. I'm in Toronto. If you don't have these type of things, I mean, what else would we have?
That's right.
One of the things is, like, I want to ask is, because you've been in touch with many companies out there, what do most companies misunderstand about human data?
I think a lot. I think I personally believe we're all kind of drowning in the mix. Yes, we talk to people about human experience, employee experience, customer experience, and we're the kind of company, as a startup, we can't really sell to the mid-level because they have a budget to do something that they've always done, and we're different. We're attacking a new kind of opportunity. So you have to get to the C-level, customer experience, chief customer experience officer, or CMO, or whatever. And we find that they are all kind of lacking. They all have a void, and that they're trying to fill, to say, I don't feel like I know my customer. I got a lot of data, and none of that. And I'm not saying that data is bad. There's a lot of value in the mature model that we've developed around data collection. At the same time, I can tell you, I've done the work. Actually, I've pulled the data from these social media platforms and said, this is what they say is me, and it's probably 30% me. They don't really understand me, and that's the data being sold back to the company. So when they put that together on a number of volume of million people, it processes. It's like stats. Bad stats are bad stats. It still feels like stats. How good your data is matters. And so I think a lot of what we consume at a corporate level around marketing data is kind of flawed in the at the source, right? I think we're pulling the wrong data, and then we don't know we're doing it looks right because we
In a garbage in, garbage out situation
right.
there, Andy?
Yeah, I could have said that. That would have been a lot easier, right? I do think there's a lot of that. I think we have a lot of garbage in, garbage out. So what we're doing on a much smaller scale than some of these other platforms is getting in and helping them connect. Let's say we get 500 people and help you understand, long-term care or home buying, first home buyer experiences, and like connect with the current Gen Zs as they're buying homes, and what are they dealing with, and it's closer, it's more connected, and it's slightly more dull of a tool because we're asking them to tell us what we care about.
Now, we started the conversation about empathetic AI. So for the audience who don't know, perhaps the difference, they know empathy, but they don't know how it relates um, to AI per se. So why don't we help them understand and define empathetic AI in a way that does not rely on marketing language?
Whew. Well, I think there's a whole realm of AI. So for the audience that may not have spent as much time as you and I have, AI started World War I, World War II, right? It was processing, natural language processing, signal processing, trying to figure out what the enemy was doing and teletyping and so forth. And so a lot of the math has been around for a long time. I'm sure NASA used a lot in the space program. And yet the big problem with this idea of neural networks was the fact you had to have so much training data to train something to understand things in a kind of a more natural way. And so that kicked in only about 10 years ago, right? Like maybe even 8 years ago, it got successful. Empathy AI is a few things. One, empathetic AI can be and will be types of the technology evolving to improve, that mechanism, that synaptic mechanism that trains technology to be more empathetic. And so again, it's one of these topics you could talk at it in different ways, but I also consider it a kind of a business topic, a conceptual topic, where AI is a technology. We're applying all sorts of technologies to business and organizational relationships and our personal relationships for that matter. And we can choose to be efficient. We can be profit oriented. We can also be empathetic, right? And so we like to think of what we do. I tell people our product's not AI. We use AI to develop more. We kind of rehumanize brands by connecting them with their communities. And so to me, the core message of empathetic AI right now is all about how am I using AI? How am I applying these technologies? How am I considering the validity of the responses coming from it, and then applying that in a way that's kind of humanized and me considering others.
Now, if you don't mind, Andy, for those who are not familiar with the topic, again, we get like 5,000 new viewers every week on the channels. What is an emotional scores? What are they? And what is an emotive persona? And how are they being used now?
Wow. Okay, now we're in the core. So we've all heard of generative AI, right? So let's go back about 6 years ago. There was something called BERT and Elmo, and I won't go into all the details, but what happened, I was talking about training data, and the problem was small companies like ours just didn't have the ability to acquire enough training data to actually train a model. And a large language model was called a transformer because you could transform the very end of that model, the last couple layers, and teach it your domain, what you were trying to accomplish. And the rest was trained more semantically, like using Wikipedia data and teaching. Like I tell people, like Jack and Jill went up the hill, but it learns what Jack and Jill is, and the king and queen had a castle. Like it starts to learn male, female, and it's vector analysis, right? So the math starts to understand the relationships of words. Then I come back and using that knowledge it already has and say, okay, let me teach you emotional scores. And what I do, generative AI uses those same language models to generate new ideas and new images, and as we've all played with. But I use it for something called a sequential classification, which what we're doing is looking for evidence of something, in this case, text. So, if we have a say a 300-word story, I want to know, is there evidence of sentiment? Is there evidence of joy? Is there evidence of anxiety? Is there evidence of activity level? All sorts of things that are more psychologically oriented. So we played with the psychological case log work for 150 years and said, what do people measure? What kind of personality things do they measure? And not that I'm getting a personality of the person telling me a story, but I might start to get a personality of the community of a collection of stories. If I have 500 stories, I can start to say, well, gosh, these people are more joyous maybe, and they have a really high altruism in their storyline, and they also have a fair amount of anxiety, or I can start to play with this evidence of finding. And we use something called Likert, so it's very low, medium, high, very high. And so we train on a 5-label system. We have 56 or plus models that do each emotional score that we do. We built our data. We had labeled supervised data to train them on. And so that's what our emotional scores are. When we read these stories, we're not looking for words like profit or basic concepts, or somebody mentioning IBM or Jeep over here. We're looking for, hey, does this person feel loved or not? And we take that data and we start to play with the complexity of the interrelationships between all those emotions as they come together, because we take and build a map of that. And that starts to get into the idea of a persona. We hear people talk about digital twins, like how do we make a twin of somebody? Well, what we kind of do is take that content from a story and start to let the thematic work, or the variance and covariance, get really technical, like how data travels in that community, so that we can start finding kind of like sand in the bottom of a river, right? Like you got some high points and low points, and like start to identify that. Then we hand that off to the researchers. We use the AI to find all this complex stuff that humans are not great at, but we let humans validate that, right? And prove that out, and then decide what really matters to our customer.
Yep. Now let's address the elephant in the room, right? So you knew that was coming, right? And for the audience, wait till you hear what the elephant in the room when it comes to AI and data collection. Privacy.
Yeah.
How do we address the privacy question and convince those skeptics out there that exposure is maybe the data that you're collecting does not mean exposure in some cases. Maybe it does. I don't know. It depends on what what application doing what. And where do we draw the ethical line that others perhaps conveniently ignore in some cases? And I've seen a few of those.
Well, first few things we do. We believe authenticity comes from trust. So we build a culture and a company and a product that is trustable by our participants. And one of the things we do is when we validate you're a human, then you become a kind of an anonymous person. You have a username that doesn't represent you. Well, you technically could write your name in as your username, but we lock you, we firewall you off as a human, and no personal identifiable information goes with your story. We also ask for your permission to use these things in different ways. We might have customers who want to use it in promotional. We started doing audio recording, not just typed stories, and that is really becoming a powerful tool, getting people to agree to use the content, their name or not. Also use their voice on audio recordings, which a lot of people want to get their voice out there. So, it's that kind of relationship. But then also when we look back and how we feed that data, of course, if you look at AI today, and almost every piece of AI being run today is kind of like time sharing on a mainframe, which means you're going up somewhere. Everything's been centralized.
Everything is 360, I guess. We do a 360 on everything.
Right. We're pushing everything up somewhere. So yes, that data is going into a third-party product at some level on the cloud, but we have all the conditional marks to say don't use our data for training and all that. And yeah, right. Like we're doing everything we can to be properly ethical with what we're doing. But let me stop there and flip it and say we've already lost this game. I mentioned I was on a business call on Zoom. I probably shouldn't mention products, but on a conference call. And the guy was from the place right beside Venezuela, Guyana. And he was from Guyana. And then like literally 40 minutes later, I saw something on YouTube, and there's 2 videos about Guyana showing up on my video list, right? It's happening all the time. People are collecting my data, and I have given them that right because I signed some T's and C's along the way. This is sort of my thing. I feel like our economy is too much based on ad revenue right now, and that humans as products, and our technology.
We are the living lab, I think, right? Aren't we?
Great way to put it, right? There's no trust. And to me right now, trust is a great profit motive. Like if you can build trust for your product, everybody's so hungry for trust, right? We want to trust companies again, and we don't trust anybody. And we shouldn't, because no one cares about you as an individual. They care about your data so they can make sure the ad revenue runs by. So I think we have to start to flip that switch. We have to make an inflection point against that, because we seem exhausted by it.
Now, based on this, what's your opinion on the topic of regulation? Do you believe we need regulation here, or do we need better system design? Because I see, like the European, are trying to do something. Canada's got this conversation of data sovereignty. Every country's got its own flavor of this. Plus, protect, the protection of the consumer as well. What do you think regulations, or are we probably too far in? Like, I mean, we've let the devil way in, probably.
I live in a world of regulation. Like one thing I'm doing with the crab pots is I'm trying to create a profit motive for the crabbers to pull their pots up when they lose them, because I think profit motive is a stronger connection to change than regulation. At the same time, I think we have to manage. I mean, I talked about the data center issue in Virginia. And all over, it's a regulatory thing. It's a policy based thing. And I think as humans, society requires some policy process. And frankly, most of us have had the best success with our lives and our economies when some level of that's managed. Unmanaged is not really a fair shake for the middle class. We'll just leave it at that. So yeah, I think regulation is on the table. The problem with regulation is, the last time I presented to a state Congress about digital signatures, this was a while ago, and it was shocking and scary to the level that they could understand what I was even talking about. And it was kindergarten, and so that's why people get so tired of this, is when you go to legislation on any of this stuff, you're dealing with esoteric intellectual topics that frankly the audience can't handle. And so we run into challenge, and we run into the opposite end. We have people legislating things that fight, some of the better decisions, right? So it's happening on both sides. And so I don't think we can run away from it. I would love to see a healthy market-based improvements as one of the key drivers. And I think intent's important. I think I'd flip it and say, I'd like to see corporate leaders consider intent and consider their profit strategies to say, my message is it's easy to make money. You don't have to pour molten lead into a crucible anymore and then haul it on a train somewhere to make a profit anymore. It's easy to make money. Make it in a way that's also good for humanity. And by the way, humanity will be really interested in buying your product if you do that. So I think this idea of good companies is an interesting topic. I hope more companies pick up.
This is what I was going to go with in my next segment of this conversation is how do we translate philosophy into business outcomes when it comes to empathetic AI and leadership decision-making process. Have you seen this impact, and what's your reaction to that?
I personally think executives are interested in this, and they're not. As a small company, our biggest challenge is just getting them so they can hear the message. And when they hear the message and then they see the results, they're blown away. So my opinion is there's a really strong appetite for this, because they're also slowly losing grasp of the speed of technology. And I like to go back in 2013. We were helping a bank, a big tech bank, and they were doing 150,000, if not 3 million trades a second, or 300 million. I can't remember the number. Crazy number of trades a second. And they needed their copper to be, or their optical to be so short from the certain paths to keep all the speeds. My message is, if you're doing 130,000 trades a second, you can create the depression in a minute or less, right? Like humans can't regulate that. Humans can't govern that. We need technologies to manage technologies. So we're moving, and AI is going to be in that space where it's going to continue to escalate in certain ways beyond human conception. We're already there in a lot of tech, so it's not that as scary as everybody thinks, but we are going to need tech to do tech. And that's why I think humans really have to think about human agency right now. What is it that is our place here in the intersection with digital tech, so that I like to joke, are we going to be the pet or the livestock, right? I hope I'm the pet, like I don't want to become either. I hope humans can stay on the ride on this, and the Jetsons versus Terminator, right? Like people have these worried concerns about where tech will take us, and it is going to get interesting. It's going to be transformative, but humans need to start to understand humans better as part of that process.
Maybe that's the tool that's allowing us to understand each other a little bit better. And I noticed that because all the data that we've collected on human, that becomes accessible to people at a fingertips. That's the positive side of AI, that now I
Yeah.
can go to AI and tell it, tell me how people feel about a certain topic in certain geographical area around the world. And I'm sure I'll get an answer. Before, probably I have to do research, read books, ask somebody. Now the information is right there at a fingertip. So it's
Brilliant.
much easier now.
Brilliant. And your company is doing so much to help connect future broader audiences through language, which is huge.
That's what I was going to ask. A lot of times these messages get confused between cultures, demographics, what language do you speak, what's your background, where you came from. The aspect of ethical AI, we focus because you probably agree. I don't know. I looked at it, about a year and a half ago. We were in Saudi Arabia. I was doing a workshop, I guess, in Riyadh. English and French, and the predominant English, French, Portuguese, I guess, Spanish, Chinese to some extent, are the highest data consumed by AI. And languages like Arabic, for instance, 600 million people speaks it, sits at a lower rank from an AI perspective to us. And then you think about the 125 languages in India or thereabout, and all the sub-Saharan languages, etc. And then you think, and the Aboriginal languages in Canada and United States, you think, oh, do we have enough data for those? Is AI treating all these demographics equally in terms of collecting their ideas, collecting what they know, and on a same level? It's not. I don't think it is. Not at this.
And there's inherent biases in all of it right now. I think it's such a big problem. I don't think it's something we can do on an individual basis. It has to. We're at a maturation point that's not quite to the point of dealing with it. But I think you're bringing up a great point. And we deal with indigenous peoples. We deal with we did a big study of minority travel in Virginia and dealing with all the plantations and dealing with all the different populations coming through. And then sometimes you're reaching populations and we collect stories. How do you not bias them in the starting of framing them to share that story with you? And how do you deal with grammar differences? Grammar of someone from the deep South that hasn't had a lot of education sharing a story will be impacted. The AI analysis of that will be impacted by that, right? So those are massive challenges. And no one cares right now. Everybody's busy about putting something on my thermometer app here. Right? Hey, ask a question about what you should set your thermometer to. Well, I don't care. I know what to set my thermometer to. We're a little too shallow on it, I think. And so I hope that's just a point in time, and that we start to deal with some of these issues.
And so is this what worries you the most, where AI is heading right now, Andy?
I think AI worries me less than people do right now.
The direction of AI.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I love
worries me all the time. I can't get out of the house.
It's a great technology. I love it. It's brilliant. And to your point, the more creative you are, the more it gives you. And I love to work. We feed it our stories, and then we'll ask generative AI, what are the themes? What are the improvement processes? What did we miss? And at the end of that, I'll say, hey, I've asked you all these questions, but the content of the stories, what did it tell you was important that I didn't think to ask you about? And then it'll come back and give me 4 or 5 things. And it's just profound what this tool can do for us. And it's it's amazing for that, right? So it's how do we improve, how do we get it to the right people doing legitimate work is, I think a very valuable thing. And so AI, I think it'll continue, and I think it'll get better and it'll get worse,
Of course.
And so I hope we all find better ways to deploy it.
I run a networking event, happens virtually. We use, virtual way to connect with each other. It's called the AI Exchange. Happens every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Feel free to join if you like.
Yeah,
we have a
great.
small group of people talk, various topics. We try to connect with people from different parts of the world, obviously. And people talk about AI and a few other things.
That sounds like a plan. I'll do it.
Yeah. And the one of the things that perhaps for the audience, maybe what are the building tools to understand humans or tools to manage them? I guess that would be from them. They're listening to us, like our audience are listening to us right now thinking, okay, empathetic, human in the middle. I always talk about human in the middle. Now we need to understand humans' emotions, etc. But how and what are the building tools to understand humans, do you think, or tools to manage them? And do you trust AI for that?
I trust AI
Or
for
can you
part of
build it
that.
to a point where you can trust it, I guess?
Yeah, I trust it for absolutely for parts of that. And I would say that it's pretty simple. If you look at if you one thing I tell everybody to do, find a local connection. Your job isn't that important. Do not spend 80 hours a week like I did for 20 years on your job. Get out, meet people, go kayaking, teach somebody to read, help a food bank, whatever, but touch your local community, because what's happening there is you're connecting to other people and getting relevance. And now if we take that relevance back into the technology, we start to understand what humans need and care for. And so I think that's part of it, is understanding what people need from us. What is the function you asked your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend, what they need from you, and bring that to the technology. So we do that through stories and do that through audio stories. And it's frankly very impactful. And we use AI. So if you take 500 stories and I hand it to a researcher, it might take them 3 days to read them, and they're not going to remember those 500 stories. They just can't. AI can. And AI can look for complexities in there. And I can add,
Reference it later for you.
right, and feature analysis, and then like give me all the look at the scores and demographics and tell me male, female, age, old, young, and then tell me where you see something. Now hand that to a human and say, make sure it's right, or give me some quotes. Give me some quote, and yeah, sometimes it'll go, hey, here's a quote. I'm like, that's not a quote that proves the score that I wanted from that. So give me this quote that proves the score you see from that story.
That's
And
right.
boom, there's the quote I wanted, right? So you do have to work it. You have to you have to beat it up a little bit once in a while, right?
Yeah.
But it is an amazing technology. It's not a panacea, and it shouldn't replace you. Figure out how it's an enabler, and that's a big piece. And training, like I like to joke and say, if you went to a company and you gave all your employees magic markers,
Mm-hmm.
there might be some really brilliant art, there might be some graffiti, and there might be a lot of nothing, right? So you have to consider your center of competency for this stuff. How do you train and enable people to use the tech you're giving them?
Absolutely. I always compare AI to a young teenager that you still have to teach a little bit in school. And
Not the first, yeah, right. I totally agree with you, and I actually love being ugly to it sometimes. Just like you stop doing that. I'm a little yelly sometimes. It's and I'd be honest, I think it takes it well, and it actually does change when you get after it. But yeah, you're exactly it. It's trying its best, and it wants to please you. That's so the couple big things. It wants to please you. That's a problem. It pushes us to the middle, right? Because it's trained data. So if you have a really cool orthogonal idea, it's going to pull you toward center when it answers things. And so does it eventually dull us down to the same common blah, and yeah, it will. So hopefully we humans keep being interesting and creative, and bring new ideas to the table that keep it expanding.
my last technical question. Have you played around with MCP servers, and what do you think?
I'm not a network guy. I've had
No,
to
no, no.
do it a
The
few
MCP
times.
server that they're talking about now for contextual
I haven't played
repository.
with it yet. No,
Yeah, no.
explain it a little bit.
So this Anthropic, I guess, came up with this.
Yeah.
What they're
Okay.
what they're talking about is putting a multiplex server, that layer that sits in between human and AI, to put guardrails around AI, to prevent that whole hallucination. Because human are lazy by design, and then we tell the AI to translate an email, and
Mm.
then that's it. We don't give it any other directions, and then it comes back with that. What MCP tried to do is try to be like the remote control for your television.
Mm.
Volume up,
Okay.
the volume up goes up, and you don't have to do anything else other than that, because the logic takes care of it.
We do some of that, but not in that version. But we're constantly trying to keep up with the changes and getting it implemented. So that's why I say I'm a practical expert, not a pundit, because I'm sometimes catch me 2 months off, and so I will.
If you don't have any requests for it, why would you do it?
Well, I'll check it out. Let's take a look at it.
Yeah.
But I'm not good for you today on that one.
One last question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So empathy is easy to fake and hard to earn. Everybody says, trust me, but trust is obviously earned, not demanded. Where do you think AI?
I think it's like the bad boyfriend, right? Your mom said stay away from him, but everybody's intrigued. Like, I think it's provocative. I think people love to play with it, and it's obviously working because nothing has ever been adopted I've never seen business execs pick something up and run with it as hard as this. And when we put a generative AI front end on the end of our process for the analysis review, it changed our value prop. Like it
Yeah.
literally overnight, everybody's like, oh, now I get it all. Right. And so it's definitely something we desire, and it will continue to matter. And I think it's trusted. I think it's trusted more than we like to say it is. It's salacious to say it's not trusted. And the people that don't trust it the most are the people that have not tried it much.
Don't
So
understand how it works, right?
don't understand it, play with a little bit. So I think that's a function of adoption, exposure, and it's going to get better. I mean, look at what's
And
happening.
humans going to get better though, Andy, right? Humans going to get better too, because they're going to learn it. It's not going to go anywhere.
That's the real big thing. I think we're doing more damage to the planet than we appreciate. And I think humans need to realize societally we need to organize to support where the technology is saying. I don't think we have to work as hard as we used to have, but we need to think. We need to be on a common place together more than we are at the moment, right? It's a crazy world right now. So I think I hope those are the directions we spend some time as AI evolves itself a bit. Maybe we need to quit pushing it in every mobile app. That's my last one.
Absolutely wonderful, Andy. I want to thank you. Did I cover everything that you had in mind for this conversation?
Absolutely. It's been a blast, and I think it's a really important topic for us all to talk about and share different perspectives. I've been doing a little bit of the podcast circuit, and it's really expanded my mind. And as I have conversations like this, so it was invaluable to me, Robin. I really appreciate your time today.
No, I really appreciate you having spent some time with me. I really like that. And anytime you want to come back and indulge us with another conversation, maybe we'll pick another topic about AI and we'll dedicate another hour for it. I really appreciate that.
All right, man. I appreciate it. And we should connect again. Let's keep it going and change the world a little bit.
I did send you a connection request on LinkedIn if you don't mind.
Perfect.
I appreciate that for the broadcast after the post edit. Thanks so much for connecting with me ahead of time.
Yeah, no problem. We'll do it, man.
And for the audience, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. If you're coming on YouTube, thanks for watching us. If you're coming on the podcast streaming platforms, thanks for downloading our podcast. We're averaging about 1,200 downloads per day now. For the past 60 days, it was about 70,000 downloads. And we're averaging about 5,000 new viewers on YouTube on a weekly basis. So I really appreciate you coming in and checking us out. And I found out that we were discovered to be top 5 worldwide conversational podcast. This is not which there's a criteria for that. So we're not pushing a product. We're not pushing, vitamins or the likes of that. We're just people coming in to have an authentic conversation on a podcast that people find it helpful. So thanks again for joining me on this episode with Andy Sitison. I really appreciate your time, Andy. Thanks so much. And I'll see you guys at the next episode.
Absolutely. Have a great one. Reach out if anybody needs me. Thanks.